We are Heather and Paul Christie.
And for over 12 years, we've worked with executives and entrepreneurs to accelerate change in every aspect of their business.
Because we are in the fastest paced business environment that anyone has ever seen before.
So join us for the Evolve to Win show. Hi, and welcome to another Evolve to Win show with Heather and Paul.
Hey, everybody.
Heather, what have you been faking?
The title of this episode is that faking it is positively exhausting. And of course, we're talking about faking your positive attitude.
So what does that mean?
Well, it's interesting. We as coaches and leadership trainers have been training people on the importance of a positive mental attitude for 14 years now.
Yeah.
And so it's always a key component, like a foundational component of any leadership training. And I have to admit that
attitude is everything, right?
It is. It's everything. And I have to admit that I had questions along the lines of this particular topic for years in our trainings. And I never really picked up on it until Friday when we had a leadership training. And the person who asked the question was specific enough that I finally understood it. And here was the question.
Okay.
We were talking about a concept that we call on the court, off the court. And this concept is essentially that there are two different ways of being. On the court is when you take full personal responsibility for all the results in your life, for your attitude and everything that happens in your world. It's essentially saying, I choose my emotions. I choose my response to anything that happens in my world. That's on the court behavior.
Okay. So on the court behavior is personal responsibility.
Yes.
100% personal responsibility.
100% personal responsibility.
Okay, got it.
So it's not to say that you won't have bad or negative things happen around you, but when you're on the court, you're saying, I get to respond however I choose, no matter what happens.
Got it.
Okay. Now, off the court is essentially everything else. Off the court is when you actually allow your circumstances to control your emotions.
Okay. So what does that look like? So
let's just say that I do something that annoys or frustrates you. So we're gonna make pretend right now.
Yes. So right? I'm in a good mood. I'm happy. I'm having fun. And then all of a sudden you come to me with just what?
Whatever. I come to you with something that annoys or frustrates you. I know that would be hard to figure out because that probably never happens in your world where you get frustrated with me. But think about it. What's one of the things that I do that's a trigger for you that just frustrates you to no end?
Well, you show up late. You show up late for the show. Not show up late, but show up with like 2 minutes left to go.
I show up on two wheels. Yeah. So he's starting to call down from the studio at like 11:15. Are you coming up now? Soon. You coming up now? You coming up now?
So I start to get frustrated. I start blaming you for us maybe not being as prepared as we could possibly be, right?
Yeah. Or for maybe you not being as prepared as you feel like you could be. And you feel like you'd be more prepared if I were here earlier to talk with you about it.
Got it.
So what happens to you emotionally? As you call down to me and say, hey, are you coming up? And
I start getting frustrated and angry.
Okay, perfect. That's off the court behavior. So why is that off the court behavior, do you think?
Because I am reacting to the situation that I feel like you've put me in.
Yes. Okay. All right, good. So you're making me responsible for how you feel.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And because it's something that I've done that makes you feel that way.
Right.
Right. So that's off the court because in reality, even if I can do whatever I do, I don't have the power over you to make you feel any way that you don't want to feel. Is that
right?
True?
I could be totally fine and not care if you showed up with 30 seconds to go, as long as I felt comfortable in what I was going to say on the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we do it all the time. And quite frankly, it's human nature. I'm not making anybody wrong for going off the court because the reality is as human beings, we go off the court all the time, every day. And what it looks like is it's just a reaction to something that happens in your world. And by the way, it's a negative reaction. So either you're blaming someone, like Paul was doing for me, maybe you just have a complaint about something. You had a complaint as well, right? Maybe
let me give you like one of the best examples, and it's really hard for people to get because it doesn't seem like you should have to take personal responsibility for this. So a lot of people blame traffic, especially down here in Southwest Florida when it's season, and especially when it turns from just the summer to season, where traffic is there's like twice as many people down here. And so what happens is the roads are just completely congested. And so if
and
you
by the way,
normally
we're
leave,
filming from Naples in Southwest Florida, in case you don't know where we are.
and so if you normally leave at 8:30 and it takes you a half an hour to get to work, you probably need to leave at 8:15 and give yourself 15 more minutes to go because you know it's going to be much traffic. So
maybe even 8 a.m.
Yeah. And so you leave and then all of a sudden you get caught in traffic. And so what do most people do?
Well, they get frustrated.
They get frustrated, but they blame the traffic, right?
Blame the traffic for being late if they
So
don't
they
get there in
blame
time.
like bad drivers and people don't know what they're doing. They're on their phones. Everybody's just wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of taking personal responsibility, it's so easy for us. I think we're just built to blame. Like we really are. That's our natural way to go, is to blame other things, other circumstances. If you get a flat tire, like, do you own that? Or do you blame it on the flat tire, or that it was the nail that you went over, or whatever it was? It's easy to blame it on something else, but it truly is taking responsibility for everything.
And you're right, it's human nature. The very first, if you're a normal human being, the very first reaction that you probably have is complete frustration, right? That's very normal. That takes zero effort.
Right.
It takes zero effort to go negative, to go off the court in face of a negative situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we're kind of wired to do this, is the automatic reaction. But here's what's happening physiologically. An event happens, we trigger a thought because of that event. And the reality is we have so much information coming at us all day, every day, that our conscious mind can't actually handle everything that comes at us. So we delete, we distort, and we generalize all these bits of information that are coming at us.
Mm-hmm.
And we pick and choose information that we can understand and make sense of. And then we make meaning of whatever information we've chosen to take from the situation. And a lot of times the way that we do that, because the conscious mind is actually, it's finite. We only have a certain amount of processing power. We like to look for things that are familiar,
mm-hmm.
right? So we like to attach meaning based on what's happened in the past. So we do all this, we create a thought, we create a story, we create meaning behind what's just happened. And if we happen to assign a negative meaning, the thought that we think is what puts us into a state of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But what we don't know is we don't recognize that whole process happens. We think the event is what put us in a state of negative emotion. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So instead of it being the event that makes you mad, unhappy, complain, blame, make excuses for why you can't be prepared, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of taking responsibility, that was my thought that entered me into that negative emotion, we just make the thing, the environment, or the person responsible for why I feel the way I do.
Got it. But what does that have to do with faking?
Well, okay. So why is
positively exhausting? So why is faking it?
So what we've done with this on the court, off the court model is we've added the key to success. People ask all the time, how do I deal with negative people in my environment? So if you've ever wanted to know how to deal with negative people in your environment, negative employees, negative customers, we all know that we face them on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. We came up with this little legend, this emoji that people could use to really identify and give them the power to take over their response. Okay, so it goes like this. If I'm on the court, I want you to picture a smiley face. So imagine there's an imaginary line between Paul and me. And on my side, pretend that my side happens to represent on the court. And I want you to picture a smiley face as the emoji that represents on the court. On Paul's side of the court, let's imagine that represents off the court, and he's got a frowny face emoji. Make that.
Which is my normal face most of the day.
That's funny. And then in the middle of the two of us, there's this line. Okay. Now, this is the key to your success here. And it's so simple that you're probably just thinking this is ridiculous, but trust me on this, it works. If your emotions are positive, you're on the court. That's your indicator. I'm on the court if I'm feeling good, if I'm feeling empowered, if I'm feeling excited. Any positive emotion will tell you that you're on the court.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if you're experiencing any negative emotion, it means you're off the court.
Okay.
Right? So it's how you feel. That's your indicator of what you're thinking. Okay.
Yep.
So if you're feeling frustrated, anxious, tired, exhausted, maybe some more angry, sad.
Yes, or any emotion, right?
Any negative emotion.
Negative emotion, correct.
Is your indicator that you're off the court. And what's really interesting is if you start paying closer attention to how you feel, that's just going to tell you where you fall. Am I on the court or off the court? No, it's so easy. If you're feeling negative, if you're feeling frustrated, upset, or anxious or whatever, so easy to then say, well, it's because, and then you fill in the blank, and it has to do with a circumstance or an individual or something outside of yourself. That's what's normal. The minute, though, that you have the awareness to say, okay, I don't feel good. Why is this happening? And you just own it, you can get back on the court and get back into that positive emotional state, which of course then leads to the positive mental attitude.
Right. But why are we talking about faking it? And why is it so positively exhausting?
I want you to think about this. All those negative emotions that we just listed off, and there's so many more.
Okay.
How do those feel?
You don't feel good. You feel tired. You feel upset. You feel angry. You feel all the emotions, correct?
And those emotions are actually exhausting.
Yes.
If you're on the court and you have the positive emotions, how does that feel?
You feel good. You feel uplifted. You feel excited, energetic.
Yeah, perfect. Now, what's really interesting, and this is what I've never seen until Friday, is I will constantly, in our training sessions, I'll say, so, which one takes more energy, being off the court or being on the court? And to me, it's been like one of those obvious questions that I feel like I almost shouldn't ask, because it's so clear that being on the court energetically is just easier and takes way less energy.
Right. It would seem because you're kind of in flow. When you're feeling good, it's just easy.
Yeah, you're empowered. You're in a place.
So it doesn't take a lot of energy.
It shouldn't. And yet I constantly have people say, but doesn't it take way more energy to get on the court than it does to be positive than to be off the court? And I've never understood this. And what they were essentially saying is what they thought this model was all about was you have that negative experience, but then you pretend to be positive.
So you put on the face.
And I never saw that before, that they thought that you couldn't actually just make the decision, make the choice and get into that positive frame of mind. So instead it was exhausting, because what they were doing is they were still in this negative place. They still had their complaints. They still were feeling the negative emotions, but then they're just putting this face on like everything's fine. Now, we all know when somebody's in a bad mental space and they put on that smile and they pretend like everything's fine, we know better, right? You can tell when somebody is not in a good space and they're faking it.
So it's one thing to be like frustrated and angry and really mad and be with it. I mean, it takes a lot of energy there. And sometimes it actually feels kind of good to be there. Sometimes you need to have that breakdown. But then to have to put on the face, the facade, to the inauthenticity of being positive. So pretending that you're being positive when you actually have this internal angst going on of just being frustrated all the time.
Yeah.
I just didn't really get, I guess we've all done it, but I've never really recognized it as how people may function in their workplace, may function at home, may function a lot of time in their lives. They're so used to being frustrated all the time and things, but then they put on this face and they think that they are like
positive.
They think they're positive.
Yeah.
And so not only does it take energy to be all of the things off the court, but then the extra layer of energy that has to be put into faking it and being somebody that's positive when actually you are pissed off and mad and angry and blaming everybody and making up excuses for everybody. It's sort of the butter knife Like you ever see the people, and we all have them, right? We all have those people in our life that they just, they're negative, but they always have kind of the niceties going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that butter knife of just, you're like, and you can't figure out, you can't put your finger on it. You kind of know what's going on, but it's total inauthenticity.
Yeah.
Just complete pretending and faking.
And I really like that you pulled out the word inauthenticity, because that really is the faking it that we're talking about. It's when you're inauthentic about your positive attitude, that takes way more energy than just getting into a positive place. So I know what people are thinking out there. They're like, well, how do you do it? I mean, what if you're in an environment that feels so negative? How do you do it? And the answer is, it's a decision. Right? It's just a decision that you make. And I want you to think about it this way. It's almost like taking back your power, right? When you decide to get on the court, like if you've fallen off the court, which we all do, when you decide to get back on the court, essentially what you're saying is, I'm not going to give away my power to this circumstance, to this person.
That's a great distinction. I think we should make that right now. Is that if you ask someone, where is the power? Is the power on the court or off the court? So off the court, again, we're talking about like people being inauthentic, pretending that they're positive, but they're actually negative internally. And
it's kind of like passive aggressive.
Yeah,
behavior,
it is kind of
right?
Passive aggressive, but the off the court being the blaming, excuses, colluding with people. So all of the negative things, that emotion where you feel negative, you feel it either in your chest, you feel it in your stomach. Some people feel it in their neck. I've had a neck problem for like 3 months. Probably because I've been off the court for 3 months straight. Pretending.
Take a look at what the pain in the neck is really about, right? Because we manifest in very amazing ways.
And then there's on the court. The on the court are the people who just own it. Like own it. Own your personal responsibility for everything. So somebody's not making you mad. You're allowing them to make you mad. You are reacting, which is an automatic reaction instead of responding, where you actually have thought, you process it, what's going on, and then you respond appropriately to whatever that is. And that's owning it. That's owning in personal responsibility. So, but we would say, where's the power? So where do you feel like you're more in control? Do you feel like you're more in control when you're off the court, feeling negative, or do you feel more on the court? Do you feel more positive and more?
It almost feels like a trick question, just like before. But
control and power
if you are authentically on the court, of course, that's where the control is, because you cannot be in a place of tapping into your success at the level that you could if you're off the court, right? When you're on the court and you've not allowed your circumstances or other people to be in any way responsible for your success, that it's really almost like just making the statement, drawing a line in the sand, right? That I no longer am going to allow my circumstances to dictate my emotions. I'm going to take control. I'm going to choose them. And part of the reason you choose them, by the way, is that nobody wants to be off the court. Even the people who are off the court, who are making you crazy, they don't actually want to be there either, but they probably just haven't learned this distinction yet. And they haven't really owned the fact that, look, we've got a choice in the matter. And it's my choice to make and not anybody else's. So the way I look at it is this: you get to live your life any way that you choose. You get to live your life where other people and other circumstances dictate your thoughts and feelings and emotions, or you can live a life where you get to choose your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions. We know it is logically possible. Your left brain is probably saying right now, yeah, that's possible, but you don't understand my environment, right? But okay, so my favorite example that I love to give that will prove to you beyond any doubt that you have the ability to control your emotions is, I want you to think back to the very last time you took a good vacation, like a week long, at least, disconnecting, full vacation.
Something you planned for a while.
Yeah, something you were excited about. You couldn't wait to unplug. When was your last like major vacation?
We just did the trip to Japan.
Okay, so perfect example. And were you excited to go to Japan?
Totally.
Beyond excited. So what happens the day before you leave for vacation?
You get it all done.
You should be feeling tremendous stress because you have so much to do and so much to wrap up and so many people to communicate with. You have to pack. You have to be the most efficient and ever. Yeah. And you should feel completely stressed out by this, but instead you're like, I'm going on vacation. And so at work, that person who usually completely annoys you, you're like, I don't care today because I'm going on vacation, right? So you have the client who might usually completely get under your skin. You're like happy and excited to talk to that person because you don't have to talk to them for the next 10 days because you're going on vacation, right? So you think about, well, what's changed in that scenario? And the answer is your attitude, your mindset. You've chosen to put something else out there in front of you that excites you. You know, it may not be in the form of a goal necessarily, but when you have something in front of you that's meaningful, that's compelling, that's exciting, you don't actually react in the same way to the stupid stuff, do you?
No, but I have a question for you. So if we're talking about people faking that they're on the court when they're actually off the court, so they're feeling in a negative emotion, they're feeling negative in general, they're blaming somebody, they're making up excuses for what's going on in their life. But then they're putting on the act of pretending that they're being positive and on the court. So what's the solution?
How do they get from off to on?
Yeah. So would you rather have somebody just stay in that negative state and not pretend? So just be a jerk and just be angry and frustrated and everything?
Right. But because authenticity.
Because the reason that we do that is because we want people to believe that we got it all together. Like we're not frustrated with anything. Nobody bothers me. You know, I'm cool with that. When actually deep down you're like, you just hate everybody, right? You're just frustrated. You just can't stand that person that's, you know, making your life so horrible. So what do you do?
Well, so one comment I want to make is that it's usually, if we're talking about other people, it's usually someone else's off the court behavior that pulls us off the court, right? Because it takes no effort to go into that negative space when you're with someone negative. So what do you do? Well, there's a couple of different options. One of the first options.
There's a good chance that somebody that's listening right now had somebody pull them off the court today.
Today already. Yeah, because it's noon. A good chance, I would say probably 100%.
If you're listening and somebody has pulled you off the court, you have felt a negative emotion towards somebody and it didn't make you feel good, please type in right now.
Yeah, let us know. I would guess that by noon, most everybody has faced at least one negative emotion. So then you look at, okay, what
I did already.
Negative? What was yours?
I told you. Just
because I wouldn't come upstairs.
Yeah, I've been perfectly fine all day. I've had a great day so far. But it was that one little thing that really, I started to feel anxiety. I started to feel a little stress. I started to feel in my chest. I was like, why is she not up here yet? Like, where is she? And so then I called you twice and you couldn't hear me. And then I get more frustrated and it starts to build up. And I'm like, oh, okay, I just got to relax and pull myself back onto the court.
But
I wasn't pretending anything.
Well, and were you even thinking about whether or not you were on the court or off the court for that matter? Okay. No. So that's one of the key, I think, observations and or solutions is to actually, when you experience the negative emotion, just think of this model and recall and remember and believe with all of your heart that you have choice in the matter, that you have the ability to choose your response to any circumstance. And like one of the things that you can ask yourself is it serving me to be frustrated, angry, anxious, whatever, mad? Does it serve me? And the answer is, of course, no. Those emotions are never going to serve you, and they're certainly not going to serve others. So then what's the other option? The other option is just, it's easier said than done. It's to
cross over to the other side.
Yeah, I mean, literally it is.
And go to just owning it.
And no, it's
so what
not
is it?
easy
Yeah, so
until it's not easy until you have practiced it enough times, like anything else. Have you practiced getting yourself from off the court to on the court? My game is always, how fast can I do it? That's my challenge to myself, because I haven't gotten to the stage yet, even though I've been training this for
but you're really
14
good.
years.
You're really good.
I've gotten much better.
You've gotten as much as you've gotten better, I've gotten worse.
I've focused on it intentionally, really. I mean, that's all it takes, is the intentional focus of, I want to see how fast I can get myself back on the court. And that's always been my game. How fast can I do it? In the face of complete and total breakdown and frustration, usually for me, it's technology. And when I have it, that's my trigger, and I go off the court and I have all sorts of choice words for my computer. And I feel like a loss of control. And it's so frustrating because it causes me time and it's inefficient and I don't know what to do. And there's really no help desk, IT desk internally to call. So that's a trigger for me. And I know it. So first thing, here's an exercise for you. Write down your triggers. I mean, literally get a fresh sheet of paper on a notebook, and I want you to write the word triggers on top of the page.
It's probably your husband or wife.
Yeah, Paul makes my number one spot. No, but it's not just
your partner.
But think about
kids.
this. I don't want you to just write someone's name, because that's not doing you the service. I want you to write, what is it that they do? What is it that they say that actually makes you react? There's a trigger. And what I promise you is, once you really identify your top triggers, you will see that you have an automatic response to these triggers. You have a habitual response to these triggers. So how do you retrain yourself? Is first and foremost, be aware when the trigger is happening, because that in and of itself can shorten your path to success. Because now when the trigger happens, I can just say, that's one of my triggers. I'm going to practice right now, staying on the court instead of going off the court. And you literally can say that to yourself. Don't say it out loud, because it's going to be kind of creepy for those around you if you start talking to yourself. But say to yourself, I'm going to practice right now staying on the court. Let's see if I can do it. And you allow someone else to be exactly where they are and be exactly who they are without judgment. That's the hard part, right? Because a lot of times what we do is we make other people wrong. If you were to say something to me that I felt was nasty or hateful, like let's just say that you called me a name.
Okay.
The natural reaction would be for me to go right off the court with you and get mad and be like, that's ridiculous and that's not nice and you're such a jerk. And yeah, that's how I used to do it. And I was really good at it. And now what I've taught myself to do, and this is really powerful, is whatever Paul says to me that I might otherwise take personally, instead I honor that that's the truth for him, even if I feel like it's not my truth, right? So instead of just making him wrong, I honor that he wouldn't have said this if he didn't actually believe it. So there's something that's happened that has made him, delete, distort, and generalize and come up with this conclusion. And I just let it be where he is. And I let him be where he is, even if he's really frustrated. A lot of things
people just say because of their emotionally unhinged, and you say things that you don't mean. It just happens. Yeah. I mean, people get out of control.
In a place of high emotion. They're not thinking clearly.
Yeah, so they don't necessarily mean it. And a lot of times when they say it, they feel really bad about what they've said. Sometimes they'll apologize for it. Sometimes they won't. But usually as we kind of tie up this conversation about faking it is positively exhausting, where we're talking about, so what would you say about people, if you are feeling exhausted every day, like if you're coming home from work, would you have somebody really start to just look internally and say, are you off the court and you're just faking that you're a positive person?
Absolutely. I would look at that, and I would go back to your list of triggers that you've written down. Another way to say that, if you're kind of unclear on like, what's a trigger, just write down a list of your current complaints. This is such a powerful, powerful exercise. What are your current complaints that are making you feel yucky? Because that's what complaints do. They make us feel bad. If you write down your current list of complaints, I want you to go one by one through those complaints and ask yourself, is there something I can do about this? Because a lot of times what we do is we human beings, we don't always handle things as directly as we could. If you know what I'm talking about, you have things that maybe you'd like to say, but you've got your reasons for why you don't say them. So some of these complaints, you might take personal responsibility that maybe you haven't even shared them in a way that you could stop that complaint from happening. So that's one option, right? What can you do something about? So then figure out what to do and do it and cross that complaint off your list. It may seem scary at first, but if you start practicing being authentic with how you feel about things, it gets a little bit easier, right?
Yeah.
So start crossing some of those complaints off your list. There are some complaints you have on your list that you can do absolutely nothing about. So those are ones that you've got to choose what to do with. What do you do with it? Do you just let it go? Or do you do something more dramatic and remove that complaint completely? But the thing is, you have choice in the matter. Make a decision. Part of what happens is we're not making decisions about how to get ourselves on the court. So make a decision, take action, and get back to the place of personal responsibility. So I would just consistently ask myself, what can I do in this place right now?
Well, and I can say, I mean, just even the last couple of weeks, I've been kind of off tilt. I've been more out of control and more frustrated and angry, and things have just happened that like little things just set me off, and I go into this tailspin where I keep going down this rabbit hole where I can't stop thinking about things that really make me mad. And so I stay mad for a long time. So I stay off the court for a long, long time. And the thing is, as you know, I don't fake it when it comes to covering that up. I would fake it to somebody else. And maybe I do to Bailey, who lives with us. Maybe I do a little bit to her, but to you, I don't. Mm-hmm. And so you really get to see the authentic, mad, pissed off Paul. But I noticed that it's been happening more and more and more. And what happens is it starts to get into a routine. So, and this week, and I'm talking about a little bit of last week, I've been really taking on being more positive, and especially like this weekend. And I'll tell you what, life is so much easier, like, and so much lighter and fun when you're feeling good and not feeling heavy. But I know that I don't deal with stress the right way. I don't really understand how to properly deal with stress. So when I'm not in a stressful situation, I feel great. I feel good all the time. But soon as that little bit of stress hits me, I start to go a little out of control, a little haywire. So I'm trying to figure that out. But one of the easiest ways, like what you said, is just the on the court, off the court. If you know you're feeling, if you have that feeling, like I carry it in my chest when I'm frustrated, when I'm angry, when I'm off the court, you may carry it somewhere else, you know, in your body. Some people get headaches, some people get it in their jaws, some people get it in their neck, in their back of their neck, wherever you get it, doesn't matter. But you know, when you're off the court, is to see if you can get yourself on, because it certainly makes life a lot easier. That's for sure.
Well, and you gave, I think, maybe the best key to how do you solve this? And the answer is you got intentional. You got tired of
it. Is, yeah.
You got tired of feeling those triggers kind of take over for you and the loss of control that comes with that. And quite honestly, for Paul, a lot of this happens on the tennis court because he's so competitive. And I think that, you know,
but that's just an excuse. That just being competitive. We watch the French Open, and there's plenty of players that completely control their emotion. I mean, you can't tell if they're winning or they're losing, because they are emotionally advanced. They have a higher emotional IQ or whatever it is. I that's an area that I really need to work on. And I think the kind of the takeaway is, if you're somebody, and that what we were talking about is faking it is positively exhausting. So if you're faking to everyone, you're being inauthentic, you're acting like everything's fine, but you're actually internally going through stress, that you really need to take a look at that, because it's not only is it not fun, but it's also physically exhausting, and it's physically demanding on your body. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to take this on for myself, is because I just know in the long run, it's not good physically to be feeling this amount of stress all the time.
And I think we make it, as human beings, we have this tendency to make it more complicated than it even is. Paul made one simple decision last week, and I actually have seen the difference. I have physically seen the difference in you. So he made that decision last week to be a lot more intentional about being on the court or getting back on the court when he falls off the court. And it's that decision, believe it or not, that starts the rest of the habits shifting, right? So it does take practice. It won't feel easy at first necessarily, but I promise every time you actually accomplish getting back into that positive space and getting on the court and feeling authentic about it, because all you've done, you've not erased what's happened out there. You've just made the statement that I'm going to take responsibility for my emotions. I'm no longer going to let this thing or this person be what's responsible for how I feel. That's the only decision that you're making when you decide to be on the court. You're not making somebody's bad behavior okay. You're not ignoring or going into a place of denial. Denial is actually off the court. So we're not suggesting that you just ignore and go into some happy place. We're suggesting that you figure out what it takes to get your thinking and your emotions in the right space, because that's where you lead. That's where you lead powerfully.
Yeah, and I guess the simplest way, if you walk after listening to this, talking about the on the court, off the court idea, what that means is the easiest way to remember for me is if you are off the court, you are playing the victim. Mm-hmm. If you are on the court, you are owning it. You are taking full responsibility for it. Victimhood is all around off the court. It's blaming every single person, place, everything for your circumstance for what's wrong with your life. And once people recognize that there's no power there whatsoever, because that means that everyone else controls your life. You have no control whatsoever.
And why would you want to be there? No one actually wants to be there.
If you decide not to be the victim anymore, you start owning your life, and then things really start to happen.
So remember, your emotions are your indicator about whether you're on or off the court. If it doesn't feel good, you're off the court. It's time to make a decision. It's really that simple.
Well, this was one of our longest Evolve to Win podcasts.
Oh my gosh,
podcasts.
It was.
Yeah, and so
long.
we must have got fired up.
Shorter.
We need to talk.
Yeah.
This is our own therapy session.
There you go.
So I hope you enjoyed the Evolve to Win show with Heather and Paul.
If you liked it, please share it. If there's somebody else who you think could benefit from this message, please share the message with them. If you haven't connected with us yet, please either go to heatherchristie.com or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Please do.
Or connect with us on LinkedIn. It was great to be with you guys today. Thanks for joining in.
Have a great week. Bye.